Well, as we step into this thankful month, the month where we do celebrate Thanksgiving, and it's very prominent on people's mind. We're starting a new series today called Thankful. We'll be here right up until Thanksgiving. You know, I don't watch a whole lot of award shows anymore. I used to be interested in those things, the Grammys, the Oscars, the ESPYs, the Dundies. If you watch The Office, you know what that's about. I don't really watch them anymore, but I used to really enjoy watching those. And in fact, I think the last live show that I watched, award show, was the ESPYs, the year that Stuart Scott won the Jimmy V Award. And it happened to also be the year that he was battling cancer. And his acceptance speech for the Jimmy V Awards become somewhat famous and renowned because of one line that he said in there. Remember, the Jimmy V Award, it's like a human bravery award. It's in the sports section. And he won it the year he died of cancer, just a few months after this. And so he said this line. He said, "When you die, it doesn't mean you lose to cancer. You beat cancer by how you live, why you live, and the manner in which you live." And if you've watched the ESPYs, if that's something you like, you probably know that speech. There have been really a number of memorable speeches at these award shows over the years. In 2009, the VMAs, it's hard to forget this one, is the year that Taylor Swift won Female Entertainer of the Year, and Kanye West came on stage and interrupted her speech, took the mic from her, and said, "I mean no disrespect, but Beyonce should have won this award." And man, that has fueled a years-long rivalry between those two, and it's memorable. You can't hardly forget that if you watched it, if you saw it in person, even if you just saw the YouTube clip a week later. 2016, Lin-Manuel Miranda, he won a Tony Award for his work on Hamilton, and he somehow managed to write a rap that got everybody that he wanted to thank into this rap. It's pretty humorous. You should check that out. You know, acceptance speeches they're a huge part of these award shows. That's why they take so long. That's why they have the award shows. That's why they don't just send them an email and say, "This is what you won. We'll send your plaque in a few days." They're a big part of it. It gives the recipients a chance to say, "Hey, listen, I didn't get here on my own. I got here because of the help of somebody else, and I want to show gratitude towards them." And it's good for us to recognize that we generally stand on the shoulders of somebody else who helped us get to that point, whether it's a co-star or a parent or whoever it might be. It's somebody who has helped us get there, somebody who's blazed the trail before us. And gratitude, showing thankfulness, gratitude, it is a powerful thing. It's a powerful force that has actually been proven to have positive effects on people's lives. I read this quote just this week from the Harvard Health Journal. It says, "With gratitude, people acknowledge the goodness in their lives. In the process, people usually recognize that the source of that goodness lies at least partially outside of themselves. As a result, gratitude also helps people connect to something larger than themselves as individuals. Gratitude helps people feel more positive emotions, relish good experiences, improve their health, deal with adversity, and build strong relationships." Bottom line, people who regularly practice gratitude live happier, healthier lives. And it's easy to recognize, especially in the month of November, especially when all of our hearts and minds are already sort of attuned to that gratitude should be the posture of our heart. It should be a regular part of our lives, a regular part of our days. When we consider all of the blessings in our lives, when we consider all the things that have gone well for us, we have to ask ourselves, well, who should I be thankful towards? Who should I give thanks to? Should I give thanks to, is it my spouse? Is it my children? My parents? my closest friends, my church family? Should I thank God for what I have? You know, it used to be that at these award shows, it was commonplace that people would always say, I want to thank God. I want to thank God. And you know, I think when they first started doing these things probably 100 years ago, I think it was probably genuine. It was sincere. But as we've grown more secular as a culture, I think it went from genuine to just this cliche thing that you say, even if you didn't really think it or believe it, to now it's almost non-existent. People don't hardly say that anymore in their speeches. And I think truthfully, we owe a debt of gratitude to a lot of different people, to a lot of different individuals who have helped us along the way. But most certainly, we should look to our Father in heaven as the origin of every good thing in our lives, of every good gift that we have. And we should have gratitude towards him because of it. In fact, this is what James, the brother of Jesus, had to say in James chapter 1:17. Every good gift and every perfect gift is from above, coming down from the Father of lights, with whom there is no variation or shadow due to change. You know, in this verse's proper context, James is responding to this incorrect belief that sin brought about in somebody's life because of the trials is God's doing. And now we know that this is not God's doing. This was written during a new age. This was written during a time when people were still trying to figure out what they even believed. They were still trying to figure out who God was, who Jesus was. They were trying to figure out some things about Jesus. And some people believe that the book of James is actually one of the earliest letters we have written in the New Testament. Some people believe that it was written as early as 7 years after Jesus ascended into heaven. So not a lot of time has passed since the events of Jesus' life and all that took place and the writing of James. There had been a great multitude of Jews who had come to faith during this time. And in the first little bit of James's greeting, we find out that that's actually who he's writing this letter to the people that were formerly Jews who are now new early Christian converts. He's writing this letter. They were still trying to figure out their theology. They were coming out of this system that most of them had believed for their entire lives, that they were coming out of this system of a works-based religion. They were also being persecuted pretty heavily at this time about what's going on. So you have to think from their point of view, they have to be thinking, is this really right? Because in Judaism, yes, we worked for our salvation and there was a reward. Well, now our reward is that we're just being persecuted. Is this what we're working toward? What is this all about? Is this really what God wants for us? Is this what he wants to do to us? To cause us harm? To lead us deeper in towards sin? And so James offers a different perspective. He says, no, what the Father gives you are good gifts. What the Father gives you are perfect gifts. He's the Father of lights. He created the stars. He knows them by name. He holds them together. He knows everything about every move that they make. And if he can hold all of that together, certainly he can hold you together. Certainly he has good things in store for you, and he gives good gifts. He's always given good gifts. He doesn't change. There is no shadow of turning with him. He's the same all the time. And you know, I wonder if James, as the older brother of Christ, as he's writing this letter, if he had something that his older brother said in mind when he wrote this. Jesus said in Matthew 7:11, how much more will your Father in heaven give good gifts to those who ask him? Jesus believed the Father gave good gifts. I wonder if the author of Hebrews read James's letter, because a couple of decades later, the author of Hebrews wrote, Jesus Christ is the same yesterday and today and forever. Our good and unchanging Father gives good and perfect gifts. In fact, James says that he's the original source of goodness in our lives. And you may feel like, well, I have a good job, and because of that good job, I'm able to purchase good things with the money that I've earned. I'm able to live a very comfortable life. And listen, hard work ethic and financial sense, good sense, those are great qualities to have. But the fact still remains that you only have what you have because your Father in heaven has granted them to you. And there's a contrast that James has given to his readers. Good things come from God, while destruction comes from sin. The verse we read, it has a pretty specific meaning in context, but there is this larger theological truth that's at play also, that our Father is the source of all good things. He is the origin of all good things in our lives. Donald Burdick wrote this in his commentary. God is the giver of every good and perfect gift. God's gifts are marked by kindness and helpfulness, not destruction. The point of James's statement is that nothing but good comes from God. So do we recognize that all of the goodness in our lives, all of the goodness of God that is manifesting itself, like that's a grace, it's to our benefit? Do we recognize that? But what good gifts specifically is James talking about? We recognize that all good gifts are from God. But what is James specifically writing about? Well, I think he outlines it pretty well in the verses before this. And the first good gift is our trials. Our trials are a good and perfect gift. Starting in verse 2, James says, "Count it all joy, my brothers, when you meet trials of various kinds. For you know that the testing of your faith produces steadfastness. And let steadfastness have its full effect, that you may be perfect and complete, lacking in nothing." I don't know about you, but when I'm in the middle of a difficult season, I usually don't sit down with a journal and just write about how blessed I am. I usually don't just say, boy, I've got it so good in the middle of this terrible season. No, I'm usually just trying to figure out what went wrong and why it went wrong for me. My attitude is usually more, woe is me. I can easily get to this place of pouting and feeling sorry for myself. But according to James, our trials are actually a blessing because of what they're doing. It doesn't feel like it in the moment, of course. It doesn't feel like it when we're going through that. We have trouble seeing how that is good for us in the moment, but this is actually something that is mutually agreed upon all throughout the Bible. Joseph said that what man meant for evil, God actually intended it and used it for good. Job believed that even in his many, many trials and his many, many losses, that God was still good and that God was still at work and God was still in charge. Paul said that even in the bad things, God is working to the good of those who love him. Paul also wrote that those trials are producing within us this unique and particular glory that someday we will receive when we get to heaven. Peter said that our trials are often what comes right before immense amounts of joy. So these trials, I know that during it seems like it's the farthest thing from a gift, and much less a good and perfect gift, but know that God is working and strengthening you. That trial, it doesn't have to lead to sin. It can actually lead to gratitude because it's a good and perfect gift when we consider what God might be doing. Secondly, wisdom is a good and perfect gift. James chapter 1 verse 5 says, "If any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask God, who gives generously to all without reproach, and it will be given to him." James said that we don't have to go through these seasons of tumult on our own. We can always ask for wisdom. We can always ask for guidance. In the Old Testament, when God told Solomon he would grant him anything, Solomon asked for wisdom. There's an entire genre of literature called wisdom literature. We have some of it in our Bible. We often tell people to listen to those who are older than them because they can impart some sort of wisdom upon them. Wisdom is a hot commodity. It's something we all want, and it's actually something that we can ask for and something that we can believe in faith that God will grant to us because he wants us to walk in wisdom, because wisdom is a good and perfect gift. Third, faith is a good and perfect gift. Verse 6 says, "But let him ask in faith with no doubting, for the one who doubts is like a wave of the sea that is driven and tossed by the wind. For that person must not suppose that he will receive anything from the Lord. He's a double-minded man, unstable in all of his ways." It is a gift that as you're going through a trial, as you're asking for wisdom, it is a gift that you can actually believe that it's going to be okay. That you can say, you know what, no matter what happens, it will be okay. God will come through for me in the end because I'm his child and he loves me and he wants good things for me and he has good and perfect gifts for me. And I have said this so many times, so often, that I don't know how people who don't have hope in the Lord, how they go through difficult trials. Just wondering, is it going to be okay? Is it going to turn out to my benefit? Is it going to turn out all right? Because as Christ followers, we can have absolute certainty, absolute faith that yes, it will be okay. The third, James writes that lowliness is a gift. Verse 9 says, "Let the lowly brother boast in his exaltation, and the rich in his humiliation, because like a flower of the grass he will pass away. For the sun rises with its scorching heat and withers in the grass. Its flower falls and its beauty perishes. So also will the rich man fade away in the midst of his pursuit." You know, it could be far too easy to read this and think that James is trying to say that wealth is a curse. In fact, if you pair this with some other scriptures, like 1 Timothy 6:10, that says, "For the love of money is the root of all kinds of evils," or Matthew 5:3, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven." If you pair this passage in James with verses like that, it could be easy to pull those out of context and get the idea that having any kind of material wealth or possession is a curse. But that's not what James meant. That's not what he said. The heart of what James was getting at is that these believers, who though they had little in terms of worldly treasures, had the same access to heavenly treasures as anyone else. This was a contrast to what most of these people had been taught in their lives. In the Jewish faith socioeconomic system of this day, there was a deep divide between the haves and the have-nots. And the haves would often look at the poor, the lowly, and wonder, what sin did they commit, or what sin did their parents commit, that this is the deck of cards they have been given? What is going on in their lives? So what James is doing here is he's looking at these two groups of people that they've been conditioned to believe this way, and he's flipping it upside down. He's saying, he's letting the lowly and impoverished know that they have a spiritual heavenly blessing awaiting them. And he's letting the proud and wealthy know that their possessions and their status cannot earn them anything, and one day it's going to run out. James actually said, let the lowly boast in exaltation, knowing that one day it's going to get a lot better. But let the rich boast in humiliation, knowing that one day that wealth, that money, you're not even going to care about it anymore. Because what you've got coming, if you are a follower of Christ, if you're an acceptor of his good and perfect gift, what you've got coming is so much better. The good and perfect gift then is really about an attitude. If we are lowly in heart, recognizing that God is our only option to salvation, then we are blessed. Fifth, and finally, James says that perseverance is a good and perfect gift. Verse 12 says, "Blessed is the man who remains steadfast under trial. For when he has stood the test, he will receive the crown of life, which God has promised to those who love him. Let no one say when he is tempted, 'I am being tempted by God.' For God cannot be tempted with evil, and he himself tempts no one. But each person is tempted when he is lured and enticed by his own desire. Then desire, when it is conceived, gives birth to sin. And sin, when it is fully grown, brings forth death. When push comes to shove, there are only two responses to walking through a trial, to walking through a difficult season. One, we can become cynical about them. We can reject God. We can dive into a life of sin. Or we can view the trial as a gift, which God is using to strengthen us and cause us to dive deeper into his love, mercy, and goodness. The ability to persevere and choose him rather than sin is a gift. The blessing that comes from choosing him over sin is a gift. I think we all know people that have been driven to this love affair with sin when things don't go the way that they would like them to go, or when things don't go the way they thought they should go. I think we've all heard this phrase that's become really popular, really just out there in the last decade or so, deconstructing, by people who just can't help but wonder, why has God let bad things happen to good people? Or why can't my relationship with God, why is it so stifling to my desires? I think we all know people who are trying to blame God for things. And just let me ask you something. How is that honestly working out for those people? Because every single person I know who has determined in their heart that God is to blame for something and they reject him, they blame it on him, they turn from him, are miserable. Every single one of them. However, I also know people who have just been through it and back in the deepest valley, but they leaned into God's love, and they are stronger now than they ever were before. So we have choices on how we respond to these things, and it is truly a good and perfect gift that allows us to persevere through come what may, and it is a good gift. It will be a true gift at the end of our lives when we hear, "Well done, my good and faithful servant. Now enter into your rest." And I love how James finishes this section. "Do not be deceived, my beloved brothers. Every good gift and every perfect gift is from above, coming down from the Father of lights, with whom there is no variation or shadow due to change. Of his own will he brought us forth by his word of truth, that he should be a kind of first fruits of his creatures." James says, don't be deceived. Don't believe the lie that because you're being persecuted, that means God is punishing you. Your trials are a gift. Don't believe the lie that God won't help you navigate through this because wisdom is a gift. Don't believe the lie that you have to wonder, is it going to be okay? Because faith is a gift. Don't believe that because you are poor or you are humble, that you're always going to be lowly. Lowliness is a gift, and God has something great in store for you. Don't believe the lie that you should reject God and dive headfirst into sin as a response to trials. As you persevere, as you respond to your situation with perseverance, it is a gift that has been granted to you. Your Father gives good gifts. Your Father gives perfect gifts. Church, we must recognize that only good things come from God. If there is any bad, any negative in your life, it is a result of the fall. Not necessarily your sin, but it is a result of the fall. And God can use that as a good gift. We must recognize that every good thing comes from God. So this year, as you celebrate Thanksgiving, as you're thinking your 31 days of thankfulness, if you post on Facebook or you write whatever it is, have gratitude for everything. Have gratitude for what God has done in your life, what good things he has in your life, what may have seemed like a bad thing at the time but actually turned out to be a good thing. But don't forget to recognize that those good gifts originate from God. Don't forget to to recognize that that job that you have, that home that you have, the material possessions that you have, those originate from God. And so there's 3 ways that we're going to do this together. First, I hope I was gonna make a document up, but I hope that what you'll do is go home, find you a piece of paper, write down 5 things that you're thankful for. Just 5. You can think of 5 things. You can probably think of 5 things before I finish this sermon. Write down 5 things and put them somewhere where you'll see them often, so that especially through this month, you'll remember to pray a prayer of gratitude and just thank God for them. Secondly, here in a moment, we're going to take communion together. And then third, after that, we're going to spend some time worshiping together. I love that this sermon happened to fall on the first Sunday of the month, which is the day that we normally take communion, because the Greek word that is most often used to describe thankfulness or gratitude in the New Testament is Eucharista. Eucharista. You may have heard a variation of that word before. What we do on the first Sunday of every month here at Horizon Church, we call it communion, but in more liturgical traditions, they call it the Eucharist. And so that term, you can hear Eucharistia, the Greek word, what we have turned to the Eucharist. What we're doing when we're taking communion is we're saying, Lord, thank you for your body that was broken for me. Thank you for your blood that was spilled out for me. Thank you for rising from the grave. And thank you for your promise that you're coming back again one day. You know, oftentimes when we take communion, we do so in remembrance of Jesus. And we are doing that. But today we're specifically going to, as we're remembering Jesus, we're going to say thank you to Jesus. And so